And really what the trusted build is an excuse to wipe election records. It's a perfect excuse to cover the tracks. Her entire city council flipped. All the incumbents lost.
This is why she asked for outside help.
How significant system log files are to the prosecution of crimes involving computers.
He's asking if there are other images that would reveal the extent, and there are at least 5 that I'm aware of.
Right, it's like not allowing people into the murder scene, the crime scene, to actually investigate it and saying, well, there's no evidence. Well, yeah, you won't let us in the damn room.
Everybody is EMS admin. They're sharing credentials.
And notice you've got these logins of EMS admin on here. But look at this one up here that pops up. DVS administrator. That is another user on this system that the election staff does not have access to. They don't even know about this account.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, remember, support the people, support this show. And with that, this is part 2 of the Tina saga. You're going to hear a lot of stuff, folks. Things that the court didn't want people to hear. And you're probably going to find out why here over the next 90 minutes. So let's bring these amazing people on the stage with me. I got Brian Lupo, Mark, Ash in America. Again, thank you guys for joining me. It seems like part 1 had a pretty significant impact with the media world out there. How are you guys all doing?
Yeah, good.
Very well.
Good. Excited to talk about part 2.
Cool. Does one of you just want to kind of recap part 1 in about 60 seconds, just to let people know? So if they haven't watched it, they'll be intrigued to go watch it, and then we'll carry on from there.
I'd say Ash is probably the best to do that, although I don't know about the 60 seconds part.
I can do it. I can do it in less. In part 1, we talked about who Tina Peters is, what the kind of whole the stories about Tina Peters, the different narratives that are out there, and we went deep into what happened at trial in terms of the credentials and Jerry Wood and the Secretary of State / Colorado AG case against her. It's kind of, I would say, a good primer, about the saga. And today we're going to get into the why of it all and what the court didn't hear, which I think is, the most interesting and most important part.
Awesome. So where do you guys want to get started with this? And Mark, thank you for joining us on this one as well. This is going to be a great conversation, folks.
Hey, happy to be here.
So I would say let's start with the trusted build and the reason for it. And Mark, I think this is your perspective would be really useful here, because you were around during some of those times. I think that we're going to talk a little bit about Dallas and Elbert County today, and there was it wasn't Tina Peters on a whim. It wasn't that there was a few people that were being election deniers because they just wanted to sow distrust in our elections, right? There were real questions about what was happening with the wiping of election machines during the retention period. And it wasn't isolated to, Tina Peters or to a core group of far-right MAGA extremists or whatever they say in the stories. From your perspective, Mark, what was it like back in the first part of 2021 as the trusted build narrative was getting going?
Well, so I was not involved in the very beginning of that trusted build being done for Tina Peters. I met Tina at the first symposium. And I met Dallas far after that as well. And if he was at the symposium, I may have met him, but I didn't remember. But that trusted build that was done by Secretary of State Griswold and Dominion Voting Systems all happened far prior. I don't even know an image had been taken up until Symposium 1.
Right. And I'm not specifically talking about the Tina Peters image or the Dallas images. I'm talking more about the mood among people who were investigating elections around the time that they started talking about the trusted build.
All right. Well,
getting to intent. What was their intent to question whether or not they were going to wipe election records? That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Well, so a lot of people may not know exactly what the trusted build is. So the trusted build is named to manufacture trust in this process. And that's why they put trust as the first word of the trusted build. It's you must trust it. It's a trusted build. Who wouldn't trust it? Because it's trusted, you idiots. So that's their mentality. And really what the trusted build is an excuse to wipe election records. It's as simple as that. So what they claim is that they are installing a new version of Dominion. And okay, great. You install a new version of a program on your computer or your phone. Do you wipe your entire phone to install a new version of, you know, whatever program, Firefox or something like that, right? When you install a new version of Office, do you wipe your entire computer to install a new version of Office? Even when you install a new version of Windows, you don't wipe your whole computer and delete all your data just to install a new version. Like, oh, all your documents are gone. Sorry about that. Whatever you didn't back up is gone. No, there's called in-place upgrades. And an in-place upgrade is installing a piece of software in place and not destroying the data that's already on there, the configuration of the system. So really, if Dominion wanted to install a new version of their software because their previous version apparently couldn't count dots properly, then they could have just installed a new version of the software and been done. But what they do is they wipe the entire operating system off. They even repartition the drive and put a whole new voting system on top of the old. It's a perfect excuse to cover the tracks. That's exactly what it is. It's effectively walking into a crime scene where someone's been murdered with a bottle of Windex and a rag and wiping all the fingerprints up. That's essentially what they're doing with the trusted build. So it gives them good plausible deniability for destroying all the data. And if you notice the pattern of the trusted builds, they always seem to do trusted builds very regularly after elections. Isn't that interesting? Which is a perfect excuse because our clerks don't really know the difference. They just know someone's coming in to do something. And what they're being told is not what actually happened. Like in Tina's case, we found out as I was working with Tina, what they originally told her was that they needed to get in right after her municipal election, which was immediately after the 2020 election, that they have to get in and make a change to her voting system. And she asked, what change are you going to make? They said, well, we're going to remove the QR code feature from the system. And the initial reason why she was very concerned is that all her ballots had a QR code on them. And she was worried that when she went to recount those ballots or retabulate those ballots, because remember that municipal election, her entire city council flipped. All the incumbents lost, the entire slate replaced with a progressive candidates all across the board. And this doesn't, if it was all progressive and all went conservative, it would still be something that was odd and that stands out. So she was worried that if they're going to remove the QR code feature or turn that off, that she wouldn't be able to retabulate those ballots again. But instead of getting onto their system and checking a box or unchecking a box, turn the QR code feature off, they come in there and they spend 2 days installing the trusted build, which was a reformat of the hard drive, repartition, a whole new version of the voting system, 5.13 installed completely over 5.11, covering up all the log files, all the extra databases that were created, anything that you would need to forensically examine to see if, one, something may have gone wrong in the tabulation. Maybe there's just a problem or a bug that resulted in election results that are not trustworthy. Not saying anything about intent or anything malicious. But what they did is they wiped all that data. So even if there was a bug of some type, we would have never been able to find it. And we know that they have bugs in their software.
Yeah. So hold on there, because this is such an important point to this entire saga, and it comes back around at sentencing, which we'll discuss in part 3. The plausible deniability is the clerk, in my opinion. If you Alpha would pull up my screen. I wrote this back when the whole trusted build happened and had this reviewed by the people who know. This is what happens in the trusted build. The EAC accredits the voting system testing lab to test election technologies for certification. The election technology vendors, such as Dominion or Liberty Vote, Clear Ballot, ES&S, complete their trusted build. They're making their golden image. Lab tests the trusted build, the ProVMV or SLI tests the trusted build and reports to Secretary of State that the vendor's system is compliant with all federal and state voting system standards. or not in theory, but in practice, they're always good enough. Secretary of State, the elected official who has no technology experience usually, takes the word of the lab and certifies the trusted build. Then the Secretary of State staff and the election technology vendor team deliver the lab tested, state approved trusted build to the county's voting machines. At this point, they hand the keys over to the clerk and her IT team, and the clerk has responsibility, statutory authority for the election, for the execution of the election. She has no role in determining the getting to that point. And as we've discussed on Why We Vote, Brian and I, with Phil Davis and others, we have code-based elections. The code fidelity is very important, but the clerk has absolutely no insight or ability to question it. And how this comes up at sentencing, it just very quickly, is that Judge Matthew Barrett basically said to Tina Peters, we can't live in a world where you're questioning the Secretary of State. But on paper, Tina Peters has statutory authority for the election, but you can't question the election and you can't question the people that are handing it to you. And if you do that, it's a major threat to democracy. And that's where we're at. That is a pinky promise. The whole thing is a pinky promise, and you have to trust the Secretary of State and you have to trust the election vendors. But if something goes wrong in the elections, it's the clerk who's going to be held accountable. And that's what happened at sentencing. He basically, seemed like there was a like an amplifier of her sentencing, because how dare you not trust Jenna Griswold?
Well, the reason why they need this is the election system is, and I've told people this for years, it's an illusion. It's an illusion of liberty. It's an illusion of free will. It's an illusion of voice. And in the judge's perspective, I get where he's coming from. It is imperative that they maintain the illusion in order to maintain their control over the people. And so anyone that threatens that illusion threatens their entire mechanism of control they've spent decades putting together. And that's what's in his head. These people are freaking crazy. They truly think they know better than the citizens, and the citizens and the clerks just have to go along, push the buttons, do the things that allows the people to think that they have a voice in order to maintain their mechanism of control across the entire platform. That's the problem.
And real quick before you continue on, Ash, we have Sean Smith that just joined us.
Nice.
He's back in the green room. Sean, just give me a thumbs up when you're ready, and I'll bring you up on the screen. All right, he's ready to go, so let's bring him on.
Oh,
And there we go.
Sean.
Bonjour.
All right, so we're talking about the intent of why images were taken in the first place back in 2021, and I asked Mark to kind of give his perspective on this. Sean, I'll ask you the same. What was their cause prior to the Colorado Secretary of State? And these trusted builds happened all over the country, but we're talking about Mesa County. Was their cause, in your opinion, prior to the Secretary of State and vendor teams coming into the counties, to question what was going to happen in the trusted build?
Yes, but that's not why the images were taken. So the images were obligatory. And the reason they were obligatory is because the manner in which the Secretary of State directed prescriptively mandatory compliance requirement for Colorado election officials, she directed the configuration of the voting systems in accordance with the manuals written by and provided by the vendor, Dominion Voting Systems, in their technical data package. This is all according to statute. They didn't have the choice not to configure them in accordance with her directive. That directive required the configuration of the voting systems because of Manual 2.09, which is Election Management System Maintenance Manual, because of what it directed for log configurations, as well as other log settings on the systems, without conducting an imaging of the storage on board all the voting system components that operated what would be considered election system software, which goes back to the language in the 2002 voting system standards from the FEC, which is a mandatory minimum. Because of that, because they did not create nor preserve adequate artifacts and log files for the audit trail, all election officials were compelled by their responsibilities under both state and federal law to take additional measures, which they were not trained for, did not give procedures for, from the Secretary of State, and were in fact obstructed by the Secretary of State and by their own county IT officials. And in the case of somebody like Tina Peters, because her county in Colorado was 100,000 or more residents, she was prohibited herself from touching the systems. She couldn't touch the voting system components for any purpose other than to use them to vote. So she had to have someone else to do it. So now back to the question, why did she image them? I specifically, explicitly, personally told her, you cannot preserve the election records on that system without imaging the storage, not the memory, but the storage. Even that's really not sufficient because of the nature of the systems, because of the way they're constructed. There are all sorts of functions and storage that are not even accessible. And there are lots of ways to obstruct the imaging and backup of even storage off the magnetic media. But in addition to that, because of what she had seen with the ballots that had not been counted in prior elections, which they tried to hold her responsible for, but was really Sheila Reiner,
yeah,
her predecessor, because they had already tried to remove her from office, to do a recall, because she had had all these citizens bring concerns to her, because she knew the population. I mean, she knew the people around her in Mesa County. She's a longtime Mesa County resident. She knew that the city council elections for Grand Junction were anomalous. It's like looking here in Woodland Park at the last two school board elections and seeing all of these. It's technically nonpartisan, but there's very clear the positions, policy, and kind of perspective of candidates. So when you see three left-leaning candidates elected in one of the most conservative counties in Colorado, very rural values, something's wrong. When you see all city council members elected who don't comport with the same values and perspective of the population that they're supposed to be serving and voting on them, something's wrong. And so she had all of this input, all this background. And she also was being told by, and she had been told by her own residents, look, your optical scanners don't actually read the vote marks on the ballots printed from the ballot marking devices. They're reading QR codes. And then Secretary of State Griswold had approved a revision from 5.11 CO to 5.13, which was going to eliminate the ability to read the QR codes. And she was concerned that if she had to do an audit, that she would not even have a voting system capable of reading the QR codes, which had been used to read the ballot marking device printed ballots. So she had an obligation under federal and state statute. She had multiple concerns from her own observations, and then multiple concerns specifically about the QR code, the elimination of the ability to read that. Because she had asked for the Secretary of State's help and they had refused. Because she had asked for the county's help and they had refused, she sought outside help. Initially, they sought Jerry Wood. But I think Jerry Wood, is a normal IT guy. He's not like Mark. He's, probably far less capable. And remember, if you have to use the images that you take from a voting system in a court case, they really have to be obtained and preserved in accordance with the rules and standards prescribed by Department of Justice and FBI. This is why she asked for outside help. She didn't know a bunch of IT people. Even the Board of County Commissioners, look at who they asked when they were given the report, the forensic report by Tina Peters.
Charles Ashby?
No, yeah. No, Roland gave that report immediately to Ashby in less than 30 minutes from the time she received it. But no, they asked for a guy, I should remember his name. It's right on the tip of my tongue. But they basically, somebody that they knew that worked at the airport knew a guy who worked in cyber ransom environments He's not a forensic expert. He doesn't do analysis. He's not a defensive or offensive guy. He's a guy who basically does negotiation for cyber ransom. And he gave.
Can you pause there for a second? Because you've touched
Yeah.
on a bunch of things that I think are really important, and you definitely answered the question that I was trying to get. There was she had cause to question what was happening in her county. And when the other thing about this is that when she asked questions about it, like when any of us ask questions about it, but she's the elected official with statutory authority, there was the social shaming and the election denialism and all of those kinds of things. But I can hear, especially because NPR and Media Matters are sort of obsessed with Brian this week, I can hear the debunk coming, Sean. The Matt Crane, we have it on the authority of Matt Crane, that all of the records that were required to be preserved were preserved, and that everything that you said that they were going to wipe that wasn't preserved, that those are, operating system logs, and nobody needs to retain that stuff, and everything that was required to be preserved was preserved. That is that will be the mainstream response to what you just said.
It is.
What
They've already said that.
Brian, go ahead.
Alpha, can you pull up my screen? So that is under that's the argument they're making, is that under federal and state law that they did back up what they had to be backed up. But Alpha, you want to read from the underlined part right there?
Yeah, it provides that, quote, all documents and records that may be relevant to the detection.
No. Start. I'm sorry.
Where it's underlined.
Where it's underlined, not highlighted.
The Federal Prosecution of Election Offenses, 8th edition, 2017, explains that the detection, investigation, and proof of election crimes, and in many instances, Voting Rights Act violations, often depends on documentation generated during the voter registration, voting, tabulation, and the election certification process. It provides that all documents and records that may be relevant to the detection or prosecution of federal civil rights or election crimes must be maintained if the documents or records were generated in connection with an election that included one or more of federal candidates.
Now, I'll let these two computer geniuses below me explain how significant system log files are to the prosecution of crimes involving computers.
Let me just say something. Let Mark do that, first of all. But let me explain something else. It's more explicit than that. So Colorado revised statute requires that any voting system leased or purchased for use in Colorado, and any one used in Colorado, be certified by the Secretary of State as being compliant with, at a minimum, the 2002 voting system standards, or the federal standards in effect, which are the 2002 VSS. 2002 VSS in section 2253 regarding the requirements for general purpose computer components within a voting system is explicit, absolutely explicit, that the audit trail must be preserved of all log files within that system for all normal, abnormal, warning, error, communication, user activity, etc. And it's explicit that it must be for the operating system. So Matt Crane, the Secretary of State, NAS, NACID, EAC have been pulling this nonsense for a long time. And the reason they do it is because when the voting system vendors are in control of what's audited, that, or what's logged, they can leave out anything they want. For example, communication logs. Trying to go through, I work with forensic teams extensively, trying to go through the forensic record of what is preserved in a Dominion or an ES&S or Hard InterCivic or Unison or Clear Ballot Group voting system, when they do not preserve communication records, fault records, operating system records. It's a uphill battle, right? You end up looking for, it's like when you're looking for ballistic missile submarines from former Soviet or Russia or the US. They're so good, you can't look for the sound of the sub anymore. You have to look for holes in the background sound, because what you find is that they're so quiet that you're looking for the absence of normal ocean and sea life sounds. And that hole is where you have a ballistic missile submarine hiding or moving. And it's like that on the voting systems, because these are, you have all of these professionals on the other side, bad actors that have been engaged in trying to obfuscate their activities and obstruct the record of the audit trail. And because they've been allowed by corrupt officials and ignoramus to prescribe what will and will not be preserved, and then overwrite even what they do preserve and generate, you have this massive hole in the audit trail. And so Matt Crane, he's pretty dumb, but he's pretty corrupt. And so they've been playing this game for a long time. They've been saying, oh, you only need the vendor preserved log files. That is absolutely false. Not only is it false based on the 2021 DOJ audit guidance for post-election audits, as well as every single voting system standard from the 2002 VSS through the 2021 VBSG, which is the most current. There's another one in development. It won't satisfy President Trump's EO, but there's another one in development. So they won't satisfy that. But under Colorado statute, it absolutely does not meet the requirements. It violates the black letter requirements of Colorado statute. Colorado statute requires compliance with 2002 VSS. 2002 VSS is explicit that operating system logs must be preserved for all of those activities. They are not being preserved. The systems were illegal to certify. They're illegal to use. The Secretary of State has violated, state statute tens of thousands of times at this point with regard to those voting system components, if you take them component by component. And then in addition, they have, because of the trusted build afterwards, they have wiped out the remaining artifacts, even of that, paucity, that small amount of log and audit trail that has been generated and preserved. So not only was Clerk Peters obligated, she had good reason for concern, and she did her best as a non-technical person, in the face of the obstruction of both the Secretary of State and her county. The only other county in Colorado that has even attempted to preserve the log files the way they should have was Elbert County, and the Secretary of State is still going after them and punitively charging them for observation of their absolutely perfectly conducted. They may not be perfect, but they're perfectly conducted in court as according to the state procedures and rules. She's still persecuting them. Right.
Yeah, they've sent them, invoices for tens of thousands of dollars for the election babysitters that the Secretary of State demanded they have in their office. They demand that Elbert County pay for it. And the entire premise of that is a farce. It's Jenna Griswold finding out in a court of law that images were taken and freaking out and still punishing them 4 years later.
The judge allowed her to seize them so that she could do an investigation. 3 years later, we still don't have the investigation report. They don't have a single person in their office who's even remotely competent or qualified to conduct a forensic investigation. And not unlike Mesa, for some reason, all the prosecutors and all the individuals involved in an official capacity never contact or enlist the assistance of forensic cyber investigators, either from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation or from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, even though both are freely available and readily available to them. That fact alone should have obliterated the case against Tina in the court, in Barrett's court. The fact that they would not use a forensic investigator nor allow the introduction of forensic evidence in that court.
The only thing that I would push back on what you said, Sean, and then Mark, I'll hand it to you, is I don't think Matt Crane is dumb. Matt Crane is the from a technology standpoint, yes, but he's not a technologist. He's the technology point of escalation for all of the clerks in counties, but he's not a technologist. He's a lobbyist, and he's a damn good one. Right. And he's cosplaying as a official and the executive director and security expert, but his real job is managing the message and managing the change, and he's doing a great job.
Yep, his job is to lie.
Yeah. There you go.
Let me ask
and just so folks know, on Why We Vote, Sean and I did almost a couple hours on the topic of this debunk of the Mesa County reports, because they're still doing that. Like, it's a rerun for us every time they do it, because they've been doing it for years, trying to say that what was found in Mesa County wasn't really found, because the cyber experts that reviewed and had things peer reviewed had their analysis peer reviewed, that they might be cyber experts, but they're not elections experts, so they just don't get it. And that's what we're told over and over again. Alpha will get you that link so you can put it in the notes. But we did a solid run on that debunk.
100%. And before you go, Mark, because I don't know if you wanted to continue on with what Brian had introduced there too, is I know we're spotlighting this because this is part of the Tina Peters saga. But listening to you guys talk on this, is this something that happened in every county of every state, this process? And if
Most
that's
likely.
and if
Depends on the
that's
systems, but yeah.
and if that's the case, are there other Tina Peters that we don't know about? Or are we hanging on to this image is the only thing we got to fight for?
So I can't
There are
speak.
other clerks all around the country.
He's asking if there are other images that would
Right.
reveal the extent, and there are at least 5 that I'm aware of. Elbert County has not come out of the fell clutches of the Secretary of State. Our understanding is that it's still in the possession there. That's the last thing we heard from Chris Beall before he was unceremoniously fired because he was too much.
No, he resigned because he just wants to go be a lawyer again.
Yeah, that's what happened.
So
He was replaced with Perkins Coie guy Alpha, by the way. I know the rest of us know that, but I don't know that you know that. So just FYI.
there are other ways that they went about this in other states too. It wasn't always as obvious as doing a trusted build or something like that. I know in Michigan, they wanted to replace the batteries is what they did. And so if you're disconnecting the system from a backup battery for X amount of time, it's going to reset, kind of like your car battery. So that was one of the things there. Now, maybe it was going to happen. Maybe it wasn't. I don't think that they ever got to that point, but that's still something that, a move that could, be used to cover something up, that you should be doing a backup of the system before you do any type of even hardware changes like that, like changing out a battery. And, I'm sure, again, maybe Mark can comment on the crime, the importance of the system logs, and potentially something like removing a battery to erase files.
All right, Mark, we're going to stop interrupting you now.
I think Mark froze.
Is
No,
he
I think he
frozen?
froze. Yeah.
Oh, no.
I thought he was just really stoic.
Well, maybe Sean, Colonel, if you want to comment on that, you can. Oh,
There he is.
Oh, there
Oh,
he
there
is.
he is. He's back. He's back.
And he's
Yeah.
muted too.
While we're waiting for him to come off mute, Sean, do you think those Elbert County images still exist? I think they destroyed them.
If I were them, as corrupt as they are, I would have destroyed them. Chances are, they didn't ask for all copies for no reason, right? That whole thing was such a farce in that courtroom. I thought at first Kramer was the judge. I thought maybe he would be rational, but the fact that he required at the time Clerk Schroeder, Dallas Schroeder, to surrender all copies to Griswold. What do you need all copies for analysis for? If a couple are duplicates, and the media made a big deal out of who he gave them to. Again, go back and look at the DOJ post-election audit guidance from 2021. It's very clear, just absolutely explicit, plain language. An election official can accomplish retaining an election record by having it under their administrative control, including by providing it to an attorney. That was what Schroeder did. He followed this is why they never could bring any kind of case or anything against him. He literally stayed exactly within the letter of the law and the Secretary of State's administrative rules. So for all her bloviating and, security threat, blah, 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 at the end of the day, she had to change her rules in order to make what he did ex post facto not tolerable. Everything he did was exactly within the law and within the code, and was what he needed to do to preserve those records. And then the imbecilic, corrupt judge Kramer, listened to the lying Secretary of State and the lying Attorney General of Colorado, and forced Dallas Schroeder to turn over all copies of the preserved election records to the Secretary of State, who had no capacity to evaluate them, and also was, conflicted, because what they would have shown was a corroboration of what you saw in Mesa, which was the fact that she was violating the law.
And just to close out this point, 2 things. One, this is also why Dallas was not allowed to testify at Tina's trial. And 2, what we haven't seen? A comparison by the Secretary of State's office of the Elbert County images and the Mesa County images, debunking all of our claims, showing that, yes, this happens all the time and it's a totally normal function of the system.
We haven't seen anything from them because they don't have any
anything.
cyber expertise, won't turn anything over to cyber expertise. Who did they have investigate the password breach where they compromised over 600 passwords for months online to voting systems? Beall had an attorney from Baird who was a former Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck attorney, which again is Dominion's lobbyist. So
And the GOP's.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So the two companies that keep popping up are Perkins Coie and the two law firms and Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck. She was at Brownstein Hyatt Farber before they added Schreck, but it doesn't matter. It's the same principles. Yeah. Yeah. Chris Murray, the former GOP general counsel in Colorado and current GOP representative, by the way, to the BEAC, which is like the, the rubber stamp board for the Secretary of State for elections systems. Chris Murray's same guy. So yeah, she was Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck. That's who did the investigation and found, this was bad, but no wrongdoing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was
before we
same-
shift. Oh, go ahead. Well, I was
Just
going to
real
give
quick,
it to you.
the same
Brian.
thing that they did. The same thing that they did with Dallas Schroeder with taking the image. They tried to pull the same thing with Coffee County in Georgia, and they used that. They built that up through the Curling v. Raffensperger case and some other cases to kind of put this out there that, hey, the 2020 election, like we, in the curling case, we want to look at the machines for that, but now it's out in the wild, right? And they did the same thing. Jeff Lenberg and Doug Logan did the imaging there. Well, they were there for the imaging. They actually had the clerk that was in charge of that office doing the actual, clicking and everything else. They just guided on how to make that image. And then from there, it went straight to, I think it was like Lillian and Strickler, which is an evidence like custody, like they hold on to evidence that's pending litigation. And it went into their safe, like the unaffected, secure chain of custody image went into their safe. But they pulled the same thing by trying to, smear the 2024 election and the machines in general because of the ability of them to do that image in Coffee. And they did it this time to say the GOP is going to steal the election. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Before we shift gears, Brian, I want to make sure the question that you had prompted Mark with, you have a chance to do it because he's back now. So if you want to bring that up. And then after that,
it was a question about, the federal prosecution of election offenses, saying that you need to back up as required for the election anything that has to do that can be used in prosecuting a crime. And I just wanted to toss it to Mark about the significance of things like system logs and the things that were not backed up and how significant they are in prosecuting election crimes. You're muted. You're muted.
I was getting ready to share a screen. Is it cool if I share a screen?
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. So we'll just show it. Here's what it is.
Hide your eyes. Who knows what we're going to see?
Yes.
Probably disinformation from far right
There
extremists.
not be a camera
Oh my gosh.
inside the RV.
All right. So this is the image. This is the before image that Tina had taken. And I want to explain to people what event logs are and what system logs are, etc. Now, Dominion and the Secretary of State, they claim that, we have procedures to back that stuff up, and everything that is needed is already taken care of. So even if you ran their EMS logger, which is right on the desktop here, this is what is supposed to take a backup of, the important log files. I want to show you what it actually does. So when you double click that, it pops this program up here. Then you click on Save Log, and it gathers all the logs. Now, it takes about 6 or 7 minutes for that to happen. So I already did this a little bit ago, and I'm going to show you the file that was created here. And you can see if I hover over it, it tells me what the file name is in the past. So you can see this is the same file right here. And let's take a look in here. So this is what it actually backs up. And so if we look in here, we've got these folders available. And I'm just going to go into this event viewer folder because this is the operating system event log is what this is supposed to be. So I go in here, and these are the event logs that are saved. Now you see there are 5 of them here, and then event log list, which is a list of these 5. Now they will claim this is all that's needed, but I want to show you what's actually on this system. So here is the event viewer, which is built into the operating system to show you the logs. Now, if you look at the standard Windows logs, you've got 4 logs here, and then one that's called forwarded events. Okay, so we'll just put this one here. We'll move this one off to the side, and you can kind of see. Now, notice there's our application, which is same as that right there, and then we've got the security, which is that one, and system, which is this one. There's 2 additionals here, DVS adjudication and EMS system. Now, these are Dominion specific logs. However, check this out. Here's how many logs are actually on the system. And there's a whole lot more than they claim. So you see there's this, there's that, there's that, there's that, you know, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 right there. Then we start opening up some of these folders and we've got some there, but here's the important ones. For the operating system, look at all these logs. There are hundreds of log files on these systems. You just keep on going down. These are logs that will tell
I
you.
feel like Matt Crane would say, yeah, Mark, but these logs that you're looking at have nothing to do with elections.
Well, except for these logs are actually logging the activities on the very computer that is tabulating the votes for the elections. So I would think that it would have something to do with it, in fact. And these logs, a lot of them, if we open up this Windows folder, look at this.
Before you
These
move on from that question, though, what does have something to do? I think the question from an auditability standpoint, public trust standpoint, is could they? Could these logs have something to do with it? Not did they? Not is there proof that they did? Not
right.
Oh well, there wasn't enough to overturn the none of those things. Could they? Could these logs capture election crimes?
Absolutely.
And if so, then to the point that Sean and Brian were going through before, they must be preserved, correct?
Absolutely. And they do capture either faults within the system in far more than just these 3 log files that they gather. There are hundreds of other system log files that will tell you all kinds of things that either went wrong in the system or maybe there was a remote connection into the system. There are hundreds of additional log files all through here. Look at this. I'm just scrolling through the list. This is just the Microsoft folder. These are the log files that are truly on this system. These are the log files that the trusted build wiped out. And again, this is just the Microsoft folder. This is pages and pages and pages of log files just from one folder in here. A little bit more than the 3 they captured on the left.
Let me ask you a question, Mark. So one of the things that I've heard in conversation is the reason a lot of this stuff is not supposed to be seen is to protect the patents of these voting machines. Are a lot of the logs that you're seeing in here stuff that's kind of irrelevant to that? This is just files and logs that
it has nothing to do with the patent on a voting machine. This is operating system logs, standard Windows operating system logs that you would need to look through to see if there was either a failure within the operating system that would have affected the tabulation or any type of malicious behavior in the operating system that would have affected the tabulation of the votes. So these are the files that you would look at.
So considering the level of importance of our elections, there's no logical reasons that you wouldn't want to have these in those other folders that they told us about.
Absolutely. And in fact, if you have a Windows computer and you look on your own computer, you can pull this stuff up for your computer too. You just click on that start button, type in compmgmt.msc like that. It'll bring up this Microsoft Common Console document here. It's a Microsoft Management Console. You click yes, and up will pop this same screen. And then you look at Event Viewer, open that up, and then you can open up Application right there, and you can start opening up all these folders on your own computer. This is not Dominion specific. This is on any Windows computer. This is basic stuff here.
And for non-technical people is a good way to think about this. Any event that happens on the computer, from logging into something to, running a specific application to whatever, any event should be captured in a log, and those logs are captured in this event viewer area within this folder structure.
Absolutely. There's critical information about the operation of the system, including even the Dominion software as it's operating. There are entries created in these other areas that Dominion doesn't even back up.
And the whole question, Alpha, on proprietary, to whatever extent it is necessary or advisable to protect any proprietary information, to which I would say there's none. Right. So if you read the general contracts between the state of Colorado, for example, and Dominion, and this is boilerplate that you find in many locations, they are asked to and expected to, state officials, to protect proprietary information. but it can't overrule state law in the state of Colorado. State of Colorado requires that the information be subject to Colorado Open Records access. Federal law requires, and this is the interpretation of DOJ in that 2021 post-election audit guidance, requires the electronic records in order to be able to determine if any crimes were committed or violations occur that would violate the civil rights of American citizens with respect to their electoral franchise. So you have to, so that the lay person is not going to really grasp how complex modern computer systems are. There are literally tens of millions of functions occurring. There are things that can occur in the background that aren't even subject to logging by the operating system. So you need everything that can be logged by the operating system. When you go back to those 2002 voting system standards, I have a lot of complaints about them. First of all, they're obsolete. They were obsolete at the time. They could only consider what they understood. That standard is older than the iPhone, but even in that standard, it's explicit. Further requirements must be applied to COTS operating systems. These operating systems are capable of executing multiple application programs simultaneously. That's why this concern about simultaneous processes. On a typical Windows-based computer, you'll have between 80 and 150 background processes operating at all times. And then you have others that are on call that are executed because of some function by the user or some other function by a system agent. And so it requires operating system audit, not voting system, not election software, operating system audit for all session openings and closings, all connection openings and closing, all process execution. So if it uses memory or processor, it requires an audit trail because those are things that can change a file or change data en route, including on the bus, open up communications. It requires it for the alteration or deletion of any memory or file object. So if it writes to the storage or to the memory, or if it deletes a file. And this explicit statement is, this ensures the accuracy and completeness of election data stored on the system and the existence of an audit record for any person or process altering or deleting system data. If you don't have this, and none of our currently certified voting systems in the United States have this, you don't have an audit trail. And if you don't have the audit trail, you don't have proof of what happened on that voting system.
This is wild to me. I do not have the tech understanding of a lot of this like you guys do, but I am able to keep up to see what the emphasis here, at least the theme of what was happening. And I break this down back to when I was a detective. If I'm investigating a homicide or a serious crime and I grab somebody's cell phone and I get a search warrant for it and I put it on a Cellubrite, when I do that extraction, I'm not expecting them to say, well, here's what we think you need. No, you're going to give me every single thing that was able to be captured on that phone. And when I, as the investigator, go through that, I will determine what I need. And if I come across files that don't make sense to me, well, then we bring in an expert to translate that to me so it makes sense so I can testify it in court. If you're just giving me packets of what's on that phone and not the full phone, then when I go to testify, I can't say I did a thorough examination because I didn't. I can say I did a limited scope examination, but who knows what was outside of that, whether it was exculpatory or whether it was convicting. Like we don't know. And when I see this is crazy to me.
This would be like a crash of an airliner and the NTSB goes there and the black box has only recorded the status of whether the vacancy lights were on in the restrooms on the plane.
That's right. They basically wiped most of the logs inside the black box.
But you
And
know
if you
what
look
it
at this
does
one right
allow?
here.
Hang on a second. You know what it does allow you to do? It allows you to say, Alpha, well, there's no evidence that there was a breach because you haven't looked at all of the things, right? Well, we looked at the claims that were brought before us, and there is no evidence of XYZ. And that's what we've seen over and over and over again is this double speak out of the mouths of the investigators who oftentimes are non-technical, but then in the case of people like J. Alex Halderman, are technical and are misleading people, in my opinion.
Well, just going off what Mark showed us in these folders, there's no way, there's zero, it is not possible for any expert to go on the stand and say there's no evidence of election fraud if they have not had the ability to go through every single one of these folders that Mark said is available in these other folders and packets and files. If you haven't gone through that and there's the ability to put something there, you cannot say then that there's evidence, because you haven't. It goes to what I'm saying with the Salubrite. You can say in the limited scope of what I saw, I didn't see any evidence, but you can't conclusively say that there's no evidence of fraud because you haven't seen everything that existed.
Right.
Yeah,
It's like not allowing people into the murder scene, the crime scene, to actually investigate it and saying, well, there's no evidence. Well, yeah, you won't let us in the damn room.
Bingo. And to your point, Alpha, about the IP thing, you know, and I think you're referring more to the source code, which is the foundation of all of this, right? And the idea that this is kept in a black box and it's shielded from any accountability, any oversight, any analysis, is absolutely insane, considering it's, you know, controlling $26 trillion worth of GDP in this country. You know, North Carolina, I believe it was North Carolina, they actually have a law that the source code can be viewed. And the Libertarian Party had to sue North Carolina in order to see the source code. They ran out of money, so that case, you know, never went anywhere. I didn't know about it until long after. But that's the foundation. You have a black box machine that is nothing more than essentially a souped up counting machine, and you can't even get to that point in it. And the idea of, you know, it's intellectual property. So what? There's processes for that. You have, you know, people that sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, you know, and are able to go in and do analysis on this. We haven't even gotten to that point yet.
So check this out here.
Let me ask you this. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I want to make sure everyone sees this real quick here. So, for instance, in one of these log files, buried way down here, terminal services, local session manager, operational log. Notice just an example of the kinds of things you can look at in these logs. 14th of December, 2020, right here, right after the 2020 election. Look at this here. Session 2 disconnected by that. Then we got a corrupted log entry right here. You can see this right here is corrupted. That's odd that exists there. There's a session 2 disconnected. Here is a remote desktop session service disconnected from EMS admin user, source network address local. So it was a local connection to remote desktop service on this EMS server in Mesa County, Colorado.
No, don't change it yet, because this reinforces a really important point that Brian and I did like 8 shows about the credentials. Everybody is EMS admin. They're sharing credentials. Now, anytime, you know, there's a lot of our audience has probably had, you know, enterprise systems access as part of work or school or something. What is the number one thing about password? You don't share your passwords with anyone, right?
But you don't share accounts either.
Right. And when it comes to the administration of elections within the local and county and state level, they are we were looking specifically at Georgia with Phil, but same thing. EMS admin, same credentials. That means that even if you do get the log files, you can't tell who did what.
Maricopa County, same thing in their audit. Everybody had the same logins. It was the default from Dominion that it was set to. They didn't even change it to make their own credentials. It was the default from Dominion.
But look at this one.
The
look at this one.
Are supposed to be disabled, by the way, once a system is placed into operation field. So if a default is being used, either there's a local election official that is using that default, or there's an agent on the system that's using that default, or there's an unauthorized person going through one of the components in the system. For example, in Mesa, where they had over, you know, at least 36 wireless networking devices on components within the voting system, one of those has been activated and is being used, and it appears on the EMS as local because it's connected to that system and it's not considered to be out through like an IIS service. Mark can talk more about that.
Just real quick analogy. Your gas station, convenience store, your mom and pop gas station, every person that works there has a unique swipe when they sign in. So if there is any sort of transparency that needs to be had, accountability for something that happened, our election systems have none of that.
They require it by law, but they don't have it.
Okay, so I want to show you guys some really important stuff here. Notice this user EMS admin is pretty common. This is what the election staff are using. This is what the election staff have that password to. And notice you've got these logins of EMS admin on here. But look at this one up here that pops up. DVS administrator. That is another user on this system that the election staff does not have access to. They don't even know about this account. That account logged off on December 14th of 2020.
Wow.
That's an account that Dominion has. So
Is this Mesa that we're looking at?
this is Mesa. Now here's another important thing. I mean, I could go over this for hours and hours and hours because I did basically a year-long investigation on this. That after doing reports 1 and 2, the forensic team kind of got broken up, and then all the work I had planned and done never saw the light of day after that. But
And
check this out here.
real quick, Mark, as you continue on this, just I want the audience to understand this isn't a mock-up.
Right.
This is a legitimate image that came from a legitimate voting machine.
This is the Mesa County image, absolutely. And check this out here. So in an operating system, you can turn on extensive logging, like Sean was talking about earlier, every file access. Notice in this EMS server, which is part of our national critical infrastructure that tabulates votes, here's the audit policy that they have set up on file and directory access. And notice this right here. What do you see right there? No auditing, no auditing, no auditing, no auditing, all the way down. They have not enabled any of the auditing to keep track of any access of any of these files. Here's how easy it would have been
Did
to do
they
it.
not enable them or did they disable them?
They did not enable them.
So they're not default enabled. You'd have to.
They
go
are
in
not
and turn them
default
on.
enabled. And
Okay.
all they had to do to enable them, really simple, audit logon events. Boom, boom. There, done. Hit OK, it's logged. Same thing, object access. There's your file access right there. Everything can be logged right there. It's all built in. If they turn these features on, they would have had it. In addition to that, in the databases, even the SQL databases that store the configuration of the election, the ballots, and stores the vote totals and the adjudication, all that, they turned or they made sure, that the transaction logging was disabled in there as well. So that database, when changes occurred to that database, there was no logging of the changes. The only thing you could look at is what it looked at in real time, but you couldn't see any history of changes. It didn't track any of that. It only showed you what it was at that instant. No logging was enabled. All those features are built into the software. All they have to do is be turned on. They didn't turn any of these on. It's
And they're
a click.
required to be, and these things are required to be logged by law.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, I could go on and on and on about this stuff. And I'm guessing that's why no one's ever poked me from the Secretary of State's office or Dominion. Because I have a lot of questions for them. I'm happy to explain all this to anyone.
That's why Matt Crane accepted an invitation to debate, right, in Colorado, and then didn't show up at the last minute, and then said the time for debate is over. Jeff Young and I were just going to walk him through the facts and ask him to go ahead and address them, but he will never appear. He will never. The one time he tried to appear in person, he was unscheduled. He showed up. I was speaking at a dinner up in the Denver area, and he and Jimmy Sengenberger showed up and tried to kind of heckle from the back. And I said, "Give them mics. Let's go at it." And they just got obliterated because they don't know what the hell they're talking about, and they say stupid
Some
things.
of that is on video too. We should find that.
Yeah, that
was fun.
And if you guys haven't seen this,
attending finally asked them to stop because it was going really badly for them, and that's how it will go for all of those officials. This is why they don't want to have this discussion in courts. Remember when the Libertarian Party sued Secretary of State Griswold over her compromise of the passwords? Not just the compromise, but how they handled it, which was basically keeping it from the public, lying to election officials. They didn't go out and change the passwords at first. They didn't do any forensic investigation ever to determine whether any of those compromised passwords were used to manipulate anything on the systems or whether election results were affected. Nor, if you listen to Mark and I, would they even have the records to do that? The log files don't exist on the systems because they're not generating them, they're not preserving them, and then they're deliberately overwriting them, both in the configuration of the system and in the trusted builds afterwards. And when the Libertarian Party, had that day in court, the imbecilic judge up in Denver in the district court, which is where they had to sue, wouldn't allow Clay Parikh to testify as an expert because the Secretary of State and Attorney General literally argued that he wasn't a Colorado election systems expert. As if there was some profound difference in Colorado election systems from Dominion everywhere else.
That's actually a really great point. And Alpha, we're coming up on the 1 hour mark. So just for the audience sake, I want to, everything we're talking about, the jury didn't see. And that's what we're talking about in this part 2 is what was the cause, what was found, what were the aspects of this saga that the jury was kept from. And for all of this, what I believe Judge Matthew Barrett said, and would say again if asked, is it doesn't matter if she was right. Her being right doesn't excuse lying to Jenna Griswold and the Mesa County IT people. And just to refresh everybody's memory, that's why she's in prison. She was not convicted of election tampering. She was not convicted of leaking passwords. She was not convicted of anything that the headlines tell you. She was convicted of a misrepresentation of Conan Hayes as Jerry Wood using credentials. And they tried to say that she stole Jerry Wood. This is all part 1. They tried to say that she stole Jerry Wood's credentials. She was acquitted on those charges because Jerry Wood lied on the stand. And that's all covered in part 1. What we're covering today is what the jury was not allowed to see, the reason for the entire thing, the intent behind the entire thing, and the findings of the entire thing.
So real quick with that. So 45 minutes, T-minus 45 minutes. That's the maximum that we can keep going right now for, because I got another one lined up. But the other question is, you guys had mentioned the word remote on the Crayon Eater. Or when we say remote, are we talking about accessing these machines from a location not at the machine?
It could be. It could be from the machine itself. The machine can consider that a remote connection coming from local, which is kind of weird, but that's a possibility depending on what you're looking at. And then, of course, remote can mean remote anywhere. And in fact, this brings me right into what I've got on the screen here. So SQL is the database program that stores the configuration of the elections, the ballots, and all the choices and all the totals. Okay. So if you look in the firewall on the EMS server, the Dominion software has opened up, has created a new rule in the firewall, and it's created quite a few of them, but this is one in particular I want to show you, SQL. And this rule is created by Dominion software, and yes, I have the evidence of that. So let's open up this rule here, and notice what it does is it opens up a hole in the firewall. Now, people, you understand, you have firewalls to protect your computer and your network from someone coming in from the outside. So here's what this rule has done that it's created by Dominion. They programmed this rule. And so what it does is the protocol here and port 1433 is the default port for SQL Server. So think of a port like a door in a building. You go through the door to get to something. Well, you go through this port 1433, and that gets you into the database, which stores the election configuration, the encryption keys, all the vote totals, basically everything. Even usernames and passwords for the users that are allowed to log into the Dominion system for that election are also stored in that database. Now, directly in 1433, look at the scope here. The remote IP address, what that means is what IP address is the connection coming from? They've got it set up to allow any IP address to come into that port. Not locked down to the local network, not a particular computer, not the local system. Any IP address in the world is what they've got this massive hole opened up in the firewall for, right into the database.
Let me frame that for you. I don't use it because it aggravates me and I would never use it, but I've got a refrigerator, and it is a smart refrigerator that's supposed to talk to my phone if I didn't hate that and would ever load the application. My refrigerator has an IP address. Dominion Voting Systems configured this voting system in Mesa County, Colorado, and the Secretary of State allowed it, and the voting system testing lab tested it and found no problem, and the EAC certified it as compliant with voting system standards. A voting system that would allow my refrigerator to connect directly to the election database for a federal general election in Mesa County, Colorado, the 12th largest county in Colorado. That's what they did.
Yeah,
My
now they'll tell you.
refrigerator could alter the election database in a Dominion voting system, and the clerk wouldn't know, the citizens wouldn't know, the Secretary of State wouldn't know, Colorado Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, the Department of Justice, nobody would know because nobody ever looks at the log files. The log files aren't preserved. Citizens are obstructed from getting to them. Anybody who tries to preserve the records, like Tina Peters, is persecuted and prosecuted. This is our current election system. My refrigerator versus your electoral rights.
Is
Hey,
it
real-
accurate to say that there's an open door to the election through this? There's an open door. There's no bouncer at the door checking IDs. There's no security at that door at all. It's an open door, but it's kind of in the back and everybody sort of forgot it was there. Is that
Well,
fair?
yeah. Well, most people don't even know it's there.
Yeah.
The only people that know this door is there are Dominion. And whoever has a connection to Dominion knows this door exists.
So let me
And
give you,
anyone could exploit this is if they know that it's there. You can also find it. I mean, I installed a free app on my iPhone and connected my iPhone to this Dominion network that, I basically set up an identical Dominion network like Mesa County, a mirror of the Mesa County. I connected my iPhone to that network. I went to the App Store and I downloaded a free network scanner app, and it found the voting system database, found that the port was open. Then I downloaded another free app from the App Store, and I connected to the voting system database and changed the results of the election using a free app on my iPhone.
so let me give you a hypothetical real quick, Mark. Let's say I'm a country that allegedly doesn't like the United States. I don't know, like China's the CCP. And I know that a contract between the United States elections and Dominion has been made. So then I get the most elite of my, defense intelligence ministry and say, hey, we can't get into the United States infrastructure, but this Dominion company has their contract. I want you guys to hack into Dominion and find everything you can about this thing that they're sending over to America. And in the
Easily.
process,
Yeah,
they would find out about this.
couple notes on that, Alpha. First of all, China built entire laptops in the voting system, literally built them in their entirety, and the major critical components on every single other component within the voting system. So the motherboard for the EMS server they built, the IDRAC, the integrated Dell remote access controller they built, the trusted platform module that is supposed to authenticate hardware they built. So they built the hardware that is critical on the voting system. Also, Chinese advanced persistent threat teams compromised the SolarWinds Serve You application, which is exactly what Dominion voting system used for their managed file transfer program. So if you are an election official in Denver County, Colorado, and you are uploading your proposed election project and ballot styles up to Dominion server so that they can validate it and then generate audio files to be played on the ballot marking device through the assisted technology, then you're going to download it again and you're going to load what they sent you as well as any updates onto your voting system. That is over their managed file transfer program or application for which they used Serve You, which is the SolarWinds application that was compromised by a Chinese advanced persistent threat team. So they've got access into every single part of it. Also,
and so on that,
if you're not using Dominion in a state like Colorado, let's say you're using Clear Ballot, you're still downloading files and uploading files into the Secretary of State site, which is poorly and inadequately secured, and which has been accessed by the same counties that are using Dominion, where the foreign actor has access to those counties.
Hey,
so in other words, you have an island hopping vulnerability created. It doesn't matter what voting system vendor you're using. If you're in a state where there is a compromised or vulnerable system, they can get to all of them.
Real quick, Alpha, I know
on that,
not everybody's familiar with these two gentlemen. So, just to credential them, Sean Smith was a colonel in the United States Air Force, retired full bird colonel that dealt with this type of stuff in the Department of Defense, Department of War now. And Mark Cook was one of the expert witnesses in Tina Peters' trial, was not allowed to bring any of this up. And Mark, I think you have 40 years in computer security?
Over 40 now. I think I started in 1986.
He looks older, but it's only 40.
Oh,
I
my-
always thought Mark was younger than me, to be honest.
This is just wild to me because I'm listening to you guys. I thought I knew I had a basic understanding of the fraud that was going on. That's why I've always turned to Brian and Ash to make sure I understand this stuff. And obviously, when they tell me that they completely respect the experience and expertise that you, Mark and Sean have, this is what I wanted all of our audiences to be able to gather. But I'm hearing right now that we have parts of our election machines that are built and outsourced by countries that have openly at times said they do not like us. We have software companies that are creating back doors, open doors, whatever you want to call them, a side gate that other countries can figure out how to get into them, or anybody can pretty much figure out how to get into them if they have the expertise to that. And at the end of the day, we have a woman who had an obligation, ethical and legal, to protect and preserve these elections. But by the whole definition of how these things were designed, by her doing her job, she's now sitting in prison. And a lot of the pathway to figure out how she did it wasn't allowed into the court, which would have at least provided the intent of why she did it, and also exposed the intent of, or at least potential intent of, these other people that wanted to steal our elections or compromise our elections. And nobody knows about this because nobody can talk about it.
That's correct. Yep.
This
And to support what Sean said, he mentioned the ServU. This is SolarWinds, and SolarWinds is exactly what happened. Is with SolarWinds, a lot of companies and agencies, government agencies, depend on SolarWinds to secure their networks. So instead of the hackers going in to hack all these individual networks, the higher value target was SolarWinds, because if they hack SolarWinds, they then have a backdoor into all of the people, all of the companies, all the agencies that depend on SolarWinds to secure their network. And who on earth would think the very product you use to secure your network is the product that the hackers hijacked and used as a Trojan horse to get into your network? What a perfect opportunity. So Tina had zero reason to trust Dominion, and no one should, or sorry, Liberty Vote. If you go to handcountroadshow.org, go up to Get Educated, and then down to Dominion ServU Cover Up. This is really important because this is specifically what Sean mentioned about this SolarWinds product, and Dominion covered up the fact that they were using this product when all this went down in, I believe, November, December 2020. So if you pull that up here, you will actually see I did a full write-up on this of exactly what happened. Of course, Eric Coomer indicating that we suck. That's his internal email. And he admitted we are so broken all over the place. If Eric Coomer himself knew Dominion was a big pile of garbage, then I think that it's probably safe for Tina to have assumed that as well. And then here is the ServU remote memory escape vulnerability.
Can you scroll back up
date
just
on
a
that?
little bit, Mark?
Look at
Sure.
the date on that.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to see. So this is January of 2020. And he writes, "We are so broken." And then under it, this is, I mean, gosh, it writes itself sometimes. Eric D. Coomer, Director of Product, Strategy, and Security. And he's making the statement, "We are so broken all over the place."
Well, and we suck on this at 12:10 a.m. So they knew it. If you look at all these internal emails, you can easily see what a disaster this company is. They've got vulnerabilities across their entire network themselves. So they are susceptible to all kinds of bad actors. And if some bad actors got in Dominion, which I have no reason to believe they didn't, then they would then be able to manipulate elections, every election that Dominion even touches. Now, here's this ServU vulnerability, and look when it was published. Okay, 2021, Dominion was running this FTP server at the time. And in fact, even when it first came out about this, look what they announced to David Moreno at Dominion Voting, okay, about this SolarWinds breach news yesterday. So they let them know this is the public DVS file share running on SolarWinds. So Dominion is notified of this December 14th of 2020, just after the election. Then what does Dominion do? This is their site, their FTP site. And this is just prior to them being noticed that there was a problem with it. Then what do? They go in and they edit their website. They edit the HTML code on their website to remove SolarWinds. Okay, so the first they take the site down, then when they bring it back up, notice there's no SolarWinds here anymore. So we'll look at this one again. Here's the before.
See if you can detect a pattern.
Yes, do you see the SolarWinds right there?
Obstructing the public's access to information which would implicate their vulnerability.
You got it. And look at that.
Coomer lying to the police about drunk driving, crashing his vehicle into a storefront, and then fleeing the scene to his bar, where he immediately started chugging so that he could mask the fact that he had already been drinking. They could have answered that like this, right? Because blood alcohol versus breathalyzer alcohol is going to show you the difference in consumption times. But
absolutely,
of course.
There's also, however bad Mark and I are going to tell you this, we could do 5, 6, 10 more hours, 20 more hours, and you'd understand how much worse it actually is, because it's not just Dominion. It's not only Dominion. It's not just Dominion. It's, the people who provide the risk limiting audit software. That was VotingWorks. VotingWorks was a product of the Center for Technology and Civic Life, which was funded by MacArthur Foundation and Soros Open Societies Foundation. Right, so it's a leftist organization that created RLA to obstruct, the public's ability to actually audit. They've rendered an auditing capability that prevents auditing. So the risk it limits is actually discovery of the truth. You have Connec, which Connec literally was a Chinese company. Started in China before they set up Connec. Same people, same functions, same connections, same contracts. Connec not only embedded and had access to county information and county computer systems, as well as to voting systems and to the voting system data and to election working data. They also were partnered with Microsoft and had a team at Redmond embedded within the Microsoft team. So it's much more deeply embedded. So they made the hardware. They're in the operating system. They're creating the voting system software. They're in the auditing software.
Test labs.
Yeah, they're in the test labs. We could go on at this for a long time. There's no part of this that is trustworthy, which is why when you come back to Tina Peters' trial, when you have Matt Crane arguing that the greatest danger here is it's going to undermine public confidence in elections and our democracy, and then Judge Barrett, like a Muppet, literally just repeating the lines that it'd be dangerous to allow Tina to talk because she's going to undermine. First of all, it's your right? That's what the First Amendment means. If you don't agree, if you think it's wrong, you get to say it. Doesn't matter if you're an election official. You don't sacrifice or surrender that right to speak what you think is true. You can't do it in your official capacity unless it's your obligation there, which I would argue it was. But Barrett's entire rationale in the sentencing and in the hearing and disallowance of evidence, the exclusion of evidence and experts, was completely and totally illegal and unconstitutional. It should have rendered him, recused, if not removed from the bench. If you can't comprehend those simple concepts, you don't get to be a judge. You don't get to be a lawyer.
Are the elections in Mesa County what keeps him there in that position? Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Should have recused.
Interest.
Colonel.
That is
if
her
you notice this here, let me take you through
opportunity for release, by the way. I think the First Amendment appeal that's currently being heard in the federal court, and that will be a big part of part 3. So everybody tune in for part 3 of this series.
So to take you through the last couple of slides here on this, this is important here. Notice they removed SolarWinds from here. Then, and this is all within hours, just so you know, all within hours. So then that wasn't enough. They still had, notice they had ServU listed here. Well, ServU was all over the news at that point, right? It wasn't just SolarWinds. Now they were getting to ServU. So what did they do an hour or so later? Boom. And I've got all the timestamps right here, and I've got the forensic backup right here, the original HTML code from the site. Then they removed ServU. So now it just has a login button, no ServU, no SolarWinds. This is the interface the clerks have. They are literally covering this up so the clerks can't see the fact that the product that they use was hacked. Okay, so they do all that, and here's your full timestamps. at December 14th, 2020 at 11:59 p.m., they had SolarWinds ServeView on there. 3 hours later, they get rid of SolarWinds. And then later in the day, they realize, oh crap, we left ServeView on there. Get rid of ServeView. Someone at Dominion made the call to go edit that HTML to obfuscate the fact that they were using SolarWinds ServeView. This right here is an example why we shouldn't trust this company. Did they go out with a public notice to let everyone know this? Did they let the clerks know this? Did they let the secretaries of state know this? They didn't tell anyone. They
No,
did
at
this
this
in the
point,
dark
we
of
were
night.
hearing safest and most secure, safest and most secure. How dare you question safest and most secure from every expert involved in the ecosystem? That is what the public was being told as this was going on.
There is a pattern of deception that has no end in these companies. And I'll tell you what, just the stuff we saw, back here on this previous screen here, how did the testing labs miss all this? How
Hang
horrible,
on a second. This
incompetent
is
the testing labs have to
December
be to miss this
12th,
stuff.
right? December 12th was when the Texas case was tossed by the Supreme Court, right?
I thought that was the 19th.
No, it couldn't have been the 19th because we were in. I was in DC at Dubliners with a bunch of Proud Boys when the news came down that had been tossed. I thought it was the 12th. I'll look it up.
Okay.
Can I add something real quick just about the SolarWinds Alpha? And this isn't anything technical, but Chris Krebs was the director of cybersecurity infrastructure security agency in the United States at the time. He's the guy that said it's the most secure election ever. And Alex Stamos was the head of the Stanford Internet Observatory at the time. He was a former Facebook chief security officer. After this election, the two of them both left their respective offices and started a cybersecurity firm together called the Krebs Stamos Group. Do you know who their first customer was?
Don't tell me Dominion, SolarWinds, or
SolarWinds. SolarWinds. And as far as Dominion, talking about the hole and everything, this is something we found out a long time ago. At the time of the 2020 election, Dominion was still based out of Canada, and they were operating out of the Robertson building in Canada and Toronto. They had an entire floor to themselves minus one other company or organization, I should say, and it was the Tides Foundation, which is directly tied, obviously open society and all that stuff.
It was December 11th, and it was December 12th was the Jericho March, which was why I was there. But it was the night before that case was tossed. The case was Texas versus Pennsylvania, and part of the rationale for that case is that the Pennsylvania was using systems that and had election outcomes that threatened the election results for the state of Texas. It was tossed. Dominion was part of that case. And at the same time, Dominion, making changes, as Mark just showed us behind the scenes. Everybody's telling the people safest and most secure. There's no question. This is just Trump being a sore loser, man. Trump's just being a sore loser. There's no reason to have any questions. They're secretly changing things behind the scenes. And then, of course, there was that whole spear phishing thing that came out in March. Came out months and months later. But in March of 2021, they were like, oh my gosh, 70-something% of devices are vulnerable to spear phishing. Let's keep telling everybody it's the safest and most secure election that we've ever had. And definitely don't let anybody know about this. Slap a traffic limiting protocol amber on it so nobody but the EIISAC can know.
They only got that because Yehuda Miller did a FOIA request and they accidentally sent that to him. Otherwise, we never would have known that report existed. Massive shout out to Yehuda.
I'm listening to you guys all, share this information. And I look at it, I always look at it from an investigator standpoint. When you're doing an operation with multiple agencies, and OPSEC is extremely important to that, especially with all the time that people invest into it. You're going to have some errors that happen. And a lot of times you can write these things off to new guys on the team. It's a lack of experience. They screwed the pooch. It's a learning experience. But if you start to have a series of errors, and it's a consistent pattern, and it's with the same agency, you have to look back, as the case agent, you got to look and be like, okay, am I dealing with the lack of experience here? Or am I dealing with sabotage? And if you come down to an inconclusive, result at the end of that, at a minimum, you're not doing any future operations with that agency at a minimum.
3 times is enemy action, Alpha.
Yep.
Once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is enemy action.
And we're at about 100 right now.
And the pattern is the same behavior. So we can fast forward to October of 2024 when it's discovered by a whistleblower that the BIOS passwords in Jenna Griswold's office were open on the website in a hidden tab, but there was no security protocol or anything. That is a massive security issue, right? For any other industry, any other group of people. If
right?
You're dealing with that in any other industry, any other group of people. But what did we see happen? We saw the Secretary of State's office not tell the clerks, try to cover it up. And then when they had to deal with it, because the GOP came out and said, hey, hang on a second, this exists. They said, oh, well, there's no evidence of a breach. It's fine. We were dealing with it. There's no evidence of a breach. Unfortunately, Josh Zeigelbaum and Chris Beal were recorded where Chris Beal says, well, we weren't going to tell the clerks because that would cause a media storm. So we weren't going to tell I'm sorry, guys, if you have the BIOS passwords, and we know from Jenna, there's 2 sets of passwords. So that's really important. If you have the BIOS passwords and you have 2 election events happening, which is open access to the machines, basically, you go in there as a voter, right? You can vote at any precinct here in Colorado. They'll just pull up the thing for you. Go in there as a voter, you have the passwords. Is it possible to know whether or not there was a breach if you don't actually tell the people that have the equipment?
I'll give you a little present. I'll give you a present on this one too. When everyone finally found out that the BIOS passwords were out there and something actually had to be done about it, what happened? Well, our governor, Polis, sends his minions out to all of the election machines around the state, and they put their hands on the election machines, and they weren't even authorized to touch them in the middle of an election.
Spoliation of evidence, obstruction of justice. They weren't even remotely qualified. I'll tell you, I gotta run in just a minute, but I'll tell you where we're at. 2005, 2006, Lance Armstrong wins his 7th Tour de France. Do you know how long it was before he admitted to doping? It's like
years,
like 7, 8 more years before he actually admits it. He was investigated multiple times, including by the federal government, and they were dropped. The charges were dropped. The investigation was dropped. It was like 2012, 2013, I think, when he finally admitted to doping and they pulled all the championships. Imagine the effect that had over that time. Theranos, 2012, 2013, 14. She's like the, fastest rising young blood, one of the richest women in America. Larry Ellison from Oracle is one of the largest investors. They get like $1 billion in funding. 2 years later, it's zeroed out. She's, under federal indictment because they lied. All their blood tests were totally fabricated. Their technology didn't work.
Vaporware.
That's where we're at. We're right in between the false claims, the false confidence, and what is holding it up right now is this institutional election fraud architecture. Guys like Matt Crane, the EAC, NAS, NASID, they are propping it up, this house of cards. But we are this close to further reports coming out. They're going to be introduced into evidence in federal courts. There are going to be indictments. This is coming. And whatever else he understands, President Trump absolutely understands if the machines and the mail voting are still in place for the midterms in 26, we have no shot at an even reasonably fair election. And at that point, they'll try to reverse everything that his administration has done, and they will try to put all their people in place again. And then the real stuff begins, right? Then if that happens in 2028, it's going to make the last Biden administration, look like Carter. I mean, they will be singularly focused on eliminating the threat, which is citizens, and any possibility that citizens ever restore sovereign control again.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys this before you take off, Sean. If President Trump brings Mark and Sean into his Oval Office, he says, "Hey, I saw this podcast with you guys that are on there. I'm up to speed on this now. How fast can we shift this to secure our midterm elections? Is it even possible?"
We can do it right now. Absolutely.
30 days. 30
Yep.
days. You prohibit USPS from carrying mail ballots. He can do that under his own authority right now for national security reasons. Prohibit use of any electronic system in a federal election. Require, because of the, so file court injunctions against use of the existing state voter rolls because they're all corrupted and unverifiable with no provenance. So require presentation of government issued photo ID to register and to vote, and vote in person on paper ballots and hand count. We can do all of that in 30 days. You do that, and it dramatically changes course of history for this country and restores citizen control over elections. Just three things.
Yep. And I've got that right here. If anyone wants to see how we do it, real simple. If you go to handcountroadshow.org, and I am sharing my screen on this, and you click that big red progressive election platform button, it will take you right here with exactly what we need to do to secure everything: voter registration, absentee ballots, how we handle election day, election night, the reporting, and the auditing. Real simple all the way down.
What were you thinking calling it progressive?
I'm effing with them. That's
Okay.
what.
Holiday.
I'm reclaiming the word, okay? And
Okay.
then if you look at this, click here to see the proposed executive order right here. I co-wrote an executive order that is on Trump's desk, and this right here is the top's just the executive order proposal, but right down here, here it is. And if anyone wants to read it, it is what the Trump admin can do right now, immediately. And it's the background of why it's important. It refers to previous executive orders that have already been signed and are in place right now, and how exactly we implement this immediately before 26. So I would suggest
Handcountroadshow.org, everyone.
You got it. Handcountroadshow.org. I got a ton of resources on here, and I've done a lot of thinking about how we actually fix this problem. It's all fixable. It's real simple.
Hang on,
just
because you're jumping ahead, and we're definitely going to be talking about solutions in part 3. Before we go, because I know we're getting close to time, and Sean, if you have to jump, please, at any time, understand that. Dallas. So this episode 2 of this 3-part series is what wasn't shown to. So we've talked about the Mesa County report findings. We've talked about her not being able to speak about her intent and the cause and why she was concerned. All of these things that we've talked about. Dallas was also not allowed to testify at the trial. They swore him in, then had a 30-minute sidebar, and then dismissed him as a witness. Brian, I think you had a video of what Dallas might have testified to. And I think before we get out of here in this episode, we should play that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we, at the respect of our guest time, I don't know. I mean, we could play it right now if you want, but I don't know that necessarily like the tech in-depth stuff.
I haven't seen that. I could probably act it out. I do have to run, but I just want to say, Franklin's quote, right? Those who would sacrifice liberty, for temporary safety, will have neither, and I think deserve neither. Anyone who would sacrifice integrity for convenience in our elections will have neither, nor will you have liberty, nor will you have safety, and will deserve neither, right? So integrity first and above all. There is no way with the current election systems. They're built literally for fraud and corruption and to obstruct transparency. We can fix it, and we can do it practically overnight by U.S. standards. We're already working. Mark, we're working. There's tons of citizens working on hand counting, the voter ID and the voter registration issue, and then paper ballots. All of it is easy. People talk about where are you going to get paper ballots? I don't know. Do you have a printer? I don't care. You don't need 1,000 security measures on paper ballots. Keep them inside the polling place, and you keep chain of custody and provenance. We can do all of that. We have the plans. There are multiple citizen organizations that can do it. This is not complicated, and it's only liars like Crane and Griswold and the EAC that tell you it's so complicated. Normal citizens can't understand. You have to have election experts. This is just giving people a piece of paper inside a controlled environment after verifying their ID, collecting that paper, and then counting the marks on it. That's how hard it is. It's grade school math and simple security instead of everything they put in place. We can do it. We can have election integrity again, but we have to have the will, and that begins with people understanding just how bad and dangerous it is now. So I really appreciate you guys keeping the spotlight on this. It's the most critical thing happening in the country. Everything else is downstream of us getting this fixed. So
Amen.
thank you so
Amen.
much.
Thanks,
Good
Sean.
to see you, Colonel.
Thanks, Sean.
Take care.
All right, so with that, let me bring this video on. You want to set us up for what we're about to see, Brian or Ash?
Brian, go ahead.
Sure. So Dallas Schroeder was the other clerk that made a forensic image. He was never prosecuted for anything for making it, but the Secretary of State, like Ash alluded to earlier, did confiscate those images, and they're in a vault somewhere in the depths of hell, aka the Secretary of State's office.
Allegedly they're in a vault. I think they destroyed them because it's a freaking smoking gun, and not just confiscated the images, full court press in the press demonizing Dallas and Rhonda and Elbert County as elections, and Mark and
me,
John,
right? Because I helped to make sure that the image was taken properly, legally, correctly. They demonized me for, I'm claimed to be hacking voting systems in Colorado, which is the most absurd thing ever. I wasn't even there. I just made sure it was done right.
Yeah, and never retracted any of that, right? So they did a full this full press gambit
Smear.
against smear, and have never retracted it. They assigned election babysitters to Elbert County, and they still do, as far as I understand it, tens of thousands of dollars in invoicing to Elbert County to cover for Jenna Griswold's narrative about Dallas, not to cover any breach, not to cover any malfeasance. There were no charges. There was no crime. There wasn't even anything unethical. As we've discussed in this, they were taking the images in accordance with the law. And Mesa County and Elbert County, as I understand it, are the only two counties who took images of the prior to the trusted build in accordance with the law.
All right. Well,
actually capturing the operating system files, etc. But what we found out from Dallas is mental. Check this out.
Well, then let's hear this bombshell testimony.
Let me clarify. Well, let me make sure that we're understanding this properly. You were told that, so you're working on an ICC right now, an ImageCast Central.
ImageCast Central, yes.
Which is like a big, tabulator that you usually have a couple of them at your centralized location where you're running mail-in ballots through pretty quickly. Then you would take the, thumb drive or whatever the media,
they're connected. It's connected to a server.
Okay, so you would have to go over to the server, process the election on the EMS server, and that's how you would end up getting the results.
That's where we get the results.
Okay,
now,
so
that was our process. And so when we finished running those test ballots through, Rhonda, the elections manager, she was headed toward where the station is for our server. And our Dominion rep says, "Where are you going?" And it's like, "Well, we got to go over here to verify what the count was." And he goes, "Well, we can just do that right here in front of the ICC." And Rhonda and I kind of looked at each other like, "Okay, that's news to us. Show us how that works." And so he proceeded to show us that when you have the administrator key, another level of security, the administrator password, you can go in there and you can hit stop tabulation. There's a button that shows up for stop tabulation. When that happens, there's another little button that shows up that says show results. And so you can hit the show results button. And sure enough, it shows the results of what you just have run through there.
The candidate results, not the number of ballots,
not
or
the
whatever,
number of ballots,
the actual election results.
Actual number counts, whether it's an issue oriented or whether it's candidate oriented. From there, Rhonda goes, "Well, can you print that out?" And he said, "Sure." Hit the button and it prints it out. So we have this report.
Okay,
so then the next,
hold on real quick. I'm going to stop you. So you have to have administrative access in order to do this, correct?
Yes.
Now, one of the things that we've learned throughout the last 3 years of investigating this is just about everybody has administrative access. Maricopa County hadn't changed the password since 2019, I believe. They all have administrative access.
Where was it that the password came up in open records requests? Is that Maricopa? Georgia.
Encryption keys were in there.
Yeah, so you have to have the key and the password to make it. Elbert County changes it. I don't know what other places what their practice is. So anyway, we were kind of blown away that to have that report. And so Rhonda.
What? Hang on a second, because you said they hit stop tabulation.
Yes.
Is that a pause or does that end the election?
Yeah, so it'd be like when you're leaving for the evening. It's just kind of putting everything to bed, to sleep. It's not stopping the count. It sends, you run the batches through and it sends the batch to the server, and it's just kind of putting that to sleep at that point. So Rhonda then asked, well, how does it show on the log and the log files? And he said, I don't know. I've never looked. Well, let's look just for fun. So he goes in there and hits the button, and sure enough, it shows out there: ballot 1 scan, ballot 2 scan, ballot 3 scan. Goes through everything that had taken place on that work order, and then it comes to where it logs stop tabulation, and then it just goes right back to start tabulation because we had run more ballots after that. And it's like, so where is the part of the file where it says that we did show results, and where's the part of the file where it says we printed a report? Wasn't there.
That's in the code.
Wasn't there.
That is how the code is designed. That's
and
not an accident.
I've asked several IT professionals about that, and they agree it could not just be an oversight to have everything and to have that then be omitted. And
that's the gist of it. And I know, we got a time.
Mark,
So
what do you think? Do you think that could be, like I said, it's got to be by design in the code? Do you think it could just be an accident?
No, of course it's by design in the code. And in fact, the thing that Dallas doesn't understand is he thinks, and they probably all think, that, you need to have administrative access. Well, that's what he was told. But what about the hidden button? What about the hidden keystroke that allows you to pull that up even without administrative access? The programmers can program whatever the heck they want. You can click on that one part of the screen while holding the control button down. They can make it anything they want. They could make it able to do. In the log files, the programmers choose what's logged, right? So if they don't want it logged that someone pulled up the results, they just don't log it. And in addition to that, even if they did log it, you could press another hidden keystroke that goes into the log file and removes certain entries from the log file. Because the problem with these logs is none of them are immutable. Okay, originally, when we first had electronic voting systems, they had printers attached to them, and the printers would print out the logs on paper. So there's no way for someone to go back and change it without really being caught, because it's printed on paper. It's not disappearing ink. It's printed on those dot matrix printer. Remember the fan fold printer? That's what they used to have. Well, now log files are stored digitally, and anything stored digitally can be modified. So what a perfect system. We'll tell everyone that we log everything, then we'll log it in a way that we can easily go back and change the logs without anyone noticing we've even modified the logs. And any log in a system that's stored in a non-immutable way can be changed. That's why all of our logging functions, if we even had electronic voting systems, which by the way, we can't have, but even if we did, the only smart way to do logging is logging to a third-party immutable system, meaning like a printout that can't be changed later. But of course, someone could just go redo the whole printout, and no one would swap the two log printouts. And then, of course, you've taken advantage of that abuse vector as well. So it's all a joke. That's the sad thing. It's all a total facade, and people don't know what they don't know.
Safe is the most secure.
To make matters worse, Alpha, if you really want to have your mind blown now, they changed the law in Colorado that if you're a county with more than 8,000 voters, Ash, I think it's 8,000 voters. If you're in a Colorado county with more than 8,000 voters, you have to, by law now, or is it by rule, scan those mail-in ballots in before election day. So
I think that was because of Elbert that they changed that law. Yeah.
You're scanning all these ballots in before the election day event even takes place.
Why would that be important?
Because you can run a report. And here's the thing, these systems, Ash has shown many times, Griswold put out the memo, make sure your systems are not accidentally connected to the internet, meaning they have that capability there. This report can be run not just by administrative officials, but it can be run by DVS admin, right? It can be run
run from someone in the parking lot if they happen to enable any wireless device on any of the systems connected to that Dominion network where they've got their EMS server and the ICCs. Any device on that network gets straight access into that database, because remember I showed you that firewall that's opened up. They could easily pull any reports they want without the election officials or staff knowing any of that's going on. And in addition to being able to pull reports in real time to actually see what the real votes are, they also have election modeling that they can do to get an estimation of what the results are just by knowing who has voted. And they use the mail-in ballot tracking system and the electronic poll books to know who has voted. They've got profiles on every single voter, and so they can build an estimation of the election results on the side. But when they can pull the results directly from the voting system, that's much more accurate, because that tells them exactly what the real results are, and they know exactly then what they need to stuff in and inject in to counter the real votes. And if you look on, again, handcountroadshow.org, I go over exactly how they do the election result modeling under Get Educated, and then the early vote mail-in ballot scam. I go over exactly how that thing works. It's real important for people to understand the mechanisms of control they have in this entire ecosystem. I see
So-
why no clerk trusts them.
First of all, there's no evidence that that's happened, though.
Also,
Also,
Yeah,
you
they don't
can't,
log
you
it.
can't look.
And they don't log it.
You can't
Right.
look. And if it did happen, it was all by EMS admin. So we don't
right,
don't
right.
know.
And if they did log
Who
it,
did-
well, don't worry, they redacted those important areas in the log. Sorry, little peasants, you can't see that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this, folks, because we're down to the last 2 minutes. Ash, set us up for what people can expect in part 3 that's coming. And then Brian, I don't know if there's anything you want to ask, and if we could try to do this in about 2 minutes, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah. So part 1, we talked about who is Tina Peters, what was the trial like, what were the key things that came up at trial. In this part 2, we've talked about all of the stuff that did not come up at trial, the things that were prohibited from being shown to the jury. So the jury made their decision on Tina Peters without any of the input of all of the stuff we've talked about on this show, because it was not allowed to be presented to them. This is the number one reason I call this a show trial, because the affirmative defenses that she was allowed to bring were very gate kept, and her testimony was severely limited by the court, and the jury didn't hear it. In part 3, we are going to talk about the results of the trial, the charges and or convictions and acquittals, what the sentencing was. I think we'll spend a good amount of time on the sentencing and Matthew Barrett's overt bias that was displayed during that. And then talk about the appeals paths to her release. And it'd be great if we could get Mark back to talk about some of the solutions from an election standpoint.
I'd love to do a 2.5, because we didn't get to report 3, and report 3 actually serves, the rest of it's a buildup. Report 3 actually proves that there was an extra set of databases, and there's a discrepancy of votes inside this system.
Yeah.
And that is what should cause an immediate investigation of at least that election, if not every other election run on that equipment.
I'm up for it. Well, let's get together behind the scenes and schedule a date and time. If we got to make it a 4-parter, I'm absolutely good with that. Brian, anything you want to add, brother?
Just that if you guys aren't following Mark Cook and Colonel Sean Smith on X and everywhere else, you absolutely should be, because these two are going to be paramount in the coming year in getting this stuff resolved.
100%. You guys, the links to what Mark brought up on the screen for us, I'll be down in the description. You guys seen that stuff scrolling across the bottom of the screen? Do us a solid share. You're going to be able to watch this on Ash's channel. You're going to be able to watch this on Brian's channel. Clip whatever you need to clip. Get the word out, you guys. Tina Peters is up against the clock, and it's not in her favor. So good night. God bless, and Semper Fi.
Thanks.